Hello everyone. My name is Sagar Mamane and I am a senior technical support analyst working with BMC Discovery support team. I'm specialized in BMC Discovery, Helix Discovery and integration of Discovery with other products. This is our today's agenda. We will start with a basic introduction of BMC Discovery and we'll understand how the overall cloud discovery works at a very high level. For this webinar's reference, GCP stands for Google Cloud Platform. So wherever the term GCP is used, it is referring to Google Cloud Platform. We will check the basic prerequisites of discovering your cloud assets using Discovery UI. We will then be seeing the prerequisites for creating a service account in Google Cloud Platform to be able to discover your cloud resources and services. After we discover the cloud services and resources from GCP, we will examine the discovered results. GCP has a feature of using IAP, that is Identity Aware Proxy, and we will see a demo of setting up IAP and discovering the hosts directly from GCP. This is an equivalent option that is available in Amazon's AWS as SSM, which is known as System Session Manager, where without using the host level credentials, you will be able to discover the hosts from the running virtual machines. We will then create some labels or tags in GCP for the resources which we'll be configuring, and we will be discovering them using Discovery. In the end, we'll see some of the commonly seen issues and how we can go about fixing them. Let's get to know more about what Discovery is. BMC Discovery is an agentless discovery solution, which means you do not have to install any agent on your servers or in your data center in order to discover your IT infrastructure. BMC Discovery is a data center discovery solution that automatically discovers the data center inventory, configuration, and relationship data and maps applications to the IT infrastructure. BMC Discovery establishes the foundation for improving your IT processes and productivity by providing timely and actionable insight to make informed decisions in IT service management, asset management, and infrastructure or operation management. The data center discovery includes variety of endpoints such as Windows, Linux, Unix, SNMP enabled network devices, printers, your switches, routers, storage devices, load balancers, the management controllers, different cloud providers including AWS, Azure, GCP, Oracle, and many other. The discovered data can then be synced with the CMDB applications such as BMC Helix CMDB, ServiceNow CMDB, and Remedy4 CMDB. This diagram gives you a quick view of all the features that are offered by BMC Discovery. Before we jump into the actual GCP Discovery, let's see how Discovery helps to discover the cloud environment and how BMC Discovery models them. Let's assume that you have deployed different services such as storage resources, virtual machines, or any other resources needed for your IT operation in two different cloud providers. For this example, I'll be referring to AWS and GCP. In order to discover these resources or services deployed in cloud environment, you will need a discovery appliance or outpost deployed in your environment. In addition to this, you will also need to configure credentials or access keys that will be used by BMC Discovery to connect to the API manager of the respective cloud provider. BMC Discovery will then run some set of predefined API calls to discover the data from these cloud providers. This data is referred to as DDD or directly discovered data. This DDD is then inferred in this format. On the top, there will be cloud provider. Then the cloud regions will be followed by the cloud services. This model is common for all the cloud providers. It doesn't matter whether you're scanning AWS, Azure, or GCP. We are focusing on discovery in this webinar. So, just so that you get a fair understanding of the technical jargons used, let's compare some commonly used technical terms in AWS, Azure, and GCP. There is a unique concept of creating projects in GCP. During the scan of one region, there will be n number of endpoints. These n number of endpoints depend on the number of projects. So, Discovery models the cloud region node for each combination of cloud region and the project ID. Let's now compare the different terminologies or the technical jargons used between Microsoft Azure, AWS, and GCP. We are showing this only for comparing different cloud services from some of the major cloud providers so that you will have a fair understanding of why BMC Discovery models all cloud providers' data in the same way. Though they have different technical jargons used, the purpose they serve is very common. For example, in AWS, a virtual machine is referred to as an EC2 instance, wherein Microsoft refers to it as a virtual machine, and GCP refers to it as a compute engine. Similarly, these are some of the commonly used cloud service examples for your reference. Now that we have seen different technical jargons used across some major cloud providers, let's look into the basic prerequisites of discovering GCP. First, and a very important prerequisite, is to have a cloud discovery license. By default, all the discovery appliances are shipped with a cloud discovery functionality, and this can be enabled from the discovery UI. Before enabling this, please ensure that you have purchased the required cloud discovery license. In case you are not aware of the cloud discovery license, you may contact your BMC account manager or your sales representative. In the cloud discovery overview, we saw that BMC Discovery needs access to the API manager in order to run the API calls and gather the data related to the services that you're running in your cloud environment. So, the next prerequisite is to create an access key from GCP's Identity and Access Management console. Access to Google's API endpoints to run the API calls over the internet. A proxy can also be used in between in case direct internet access is restricted from Discovery Appliance or Outpost. Access to GCP's API endpoints. For example, you need to enable Compute Engine API if you want to scan the virtual machines in your GCP environment. If this is not enabled, Discovery will be unable to discover the underlying services such as virtual machines which you have deployed. Time settings. The time synchronization is essential. GCP uses time-stamped authentication. So to avoid any discrepancy or scan failures, you need to make sure that the appliance's time is synced using the NTP server. The credentials must be added in Discovery UI to perform a discovery scan. And this needs to be enabled in every project that you want to scan using BMC Discovery. Let's now look at the basic prerequisites of setting up a GCP scan user. A new service account has to be created in GCP that you will be using to configure it in Discovery UI and perform a scan of your GCP environment. The default or inbuilt viewer role is sufficient as it provides read permission to all the resources in GCP, viewer permission to multiple projects. In case you want to use the same service account to scan multiple Google projects, then in this case, the service account needs to be added in the Google projects with a viewer role. With this, now let's take a look at the demo where we'll be configuring and meeting the basic prerequisites. We will then be setting up a GCP service account. We'll configure it in Discovery UI and then perform the first GCP scan. I'm now logged in to the Discovery UI. Let's first verify that the cloud discovery is enabled. Go to Administration, licensing. And as you can see, currently the cloud discovery is in disabled state. So we need to enable this. Click on the enable button. There will be a pop-up. Please be sure to read it. As mentioned earlier, it is licensed separately. So if you're not aware, you may also contact your account manager or your sales representative. So I'm enabling it now. Now the cloud discovery is enabled. Let's check whether time sync is enabled. Go to administration, time sync. As you can see, the time sync is currently in disabled state. So we will enable it by updating a valid NTP server. Let's apply the settings. The appliance is now synced successfully with the NTP server. So we have met two basic prerequisites from Discovery UI. Let's go to administration, the cloud and API providers. And here you can see the list of cloud providers that are currently supported by BMC Discovery. Let's go to Google Cloud Platform. And you can see the regions that BMC Discovery supports. There are different API methods, the API requests that we use that are also listed here. For example, we can see for Google Compute Engine, BMC Discovery uses these API calls to get the list of all the compute resources which are running in Google Cloud Platform. Let's now create a new GCP service account and we will configure this service account in Discovery. So I'm logged into GCP console and here I'm creating a project named Webinar Demo. The project is created successfully. Let's go to IAM admin. As you can see, currently we do not have any accounts configured. So we need a service account to be created. So let's go to service account, create a new service account. And I'm going to name it as webinar demo, create and continue. And the default role that this service account needs initially is the viewer role so that it has access to view all the services and the resources which we'll be configuring in this specific project. Continue, click done. The service account is now created. In order for us to configure this service account in Discovery, we need to create a key. So let's click on Actions, Manage Keys, and add a key because we do not have any new key created yet. Once we click on Add Key, a JSON formatted key is downloaded, which we are going to import in Discovery UI. So let's go to Discovery UI, click on Add, select the Google Cloud Platform type of credentials. I'm going to name it as Webinar Demo Credential. Choose a file, click Open, and click Apply. The credentials are now created successfully. Let's do a credential test quickly. We do not have any region set up yet because we do not have any resources configured. So let's just click on test by selecting the default region. The credential test has failed because the Cloud Resource Manager service is not enabled in GCP console. So let's quickly go to our GCP console and look for Cloud Resource Manager API and let's enable that. So Cloud Resource Manager API is used for creating, reading, and updating the metadata from the Google project. The API is now enabled. Let's go back and retry the credential test. The credential test has failed again. Let's check the result. The actual test for this credential test is successful. However, when it's trying to look for the underlying virtual machines and trying to check whether it can manage the SSH keys using the identity aware proxy, that's the time it's failing. So that's not the actual failure. We are going to cover IAP or identity aware proxy later in this webinar. So we will then see how we can bypass this error message and successfully test the credentials. Let's click on done. We do not have any resources configured in GCP as of now, so we will not be able to run the discovery scan. And even if we run the discovery scan, we will only be able to see the name of the project, and that will appear as the name of the region. So I'm going to now create a few resources, and then we will be performing a discovery run to discover all those resources. I now have a few virtual machine instances and a file store storage service created. I'm now going to create a new scan in Discovery UI, and we are going to discover the Google Cloud Platform. So go to Manage Discovery, click on Add New Run, select Target as Cloud. In the provider, select Google Cloud Platform. If you have more than one GCP credentials added, you will be able to select it from here. In our case, it is only one, so we'll go with the default. The resources which I have configured are in US Central Zone, so I'm going to select that from the region. We'll discuss about identity aware proxy in our next demo in the same webinar. For now, I'm going to just keep it enabled and click OK to initiate a scan. The scan is now completed successfully. Let's go to recent runs and open the scan that we just successfully completed. So as we can see, we have successfully completed this scan and we have discovered two virtual machines and two storage volumes. Let's go to virtual machines. And these are the same virtual machines which we have deployed here in our GCP project. Let's go to explore data. And here we can see that we have a cloud provider and the cloud regions are created. So let's go to cloud provider and we'll be able to see the same details linked. This is something that we discussed in the cloud discovery overview. So we have two virtual machines, the storage, the file system. Let's go to file system and check what we have discovered in file system. And this is the file store storage resource that I had configured, and we have discovered that successfully. So this concludes the demo of configuring the prerequisites, setting up a GCP service account, performing the GCP discovery, and discovering the resources which we have configured in GCP. The virtual machines were discovered successfully. However, we didn't see any associated host, or we didn't see any hosts that were actually discovered during our discovery run. There is a service available in GCP which is called as Identity Aware Proxy or IAP, and this enables you to discover the hosts which are running in the virtual machines. GCP's IAP is an authorization service that enables you to manage HTTP and HTTPS access to the applications running in GCP. There are certain additional permissions that you need to configure in order for the IAP to configure and to work successfully. Let's see what those permissions and the firewall rules are. So first thing is you need to enable the IAP sessions. It is a specific service in GCP that needs to be enabled. We are going to see a demo on how we can enable IAP and we are going to configure it. There are certain firewall rules that you need to make sure that they are configured so that the communication to the underlying applications is allowed. The additional permissions for IAP is about adding the compute project set common instance metadata permission, IAM service account act as role, and for firewall, you need to allow TCP port 22 for SSH, that is Linux and the Unix based devices, and PowerShell HTTP and HTTPS TCP ports 5985 and 5986 respectively. In case you are using any custom port for SSH, then this needs to be updated in the discovery configuration page so that discovery is aware of this change in your environment. Let's now look at the demo of configuring the IAP, and we are going to discover the hosts using IAP. I'm back into my GCP console. Let's go to the service account that we have created and add the additional permissions. This is the account which we have created for this demo. So let's select it and click on Grant Access. In the new principal, select the same account that we are working on. And in Select a Role, click on the drop down and type Compute Instance Admin. Select this, add another role, and type IAP Secured Tunnel User. Add another role and select Service Account User. Click Save. So just to recap, make sure that you have Compute Instance Admin, IAP Secure Tunnel User, Service Account User added to the service account which we are using for discovery purpose. Now let's go to IAP and enable IAP. Enable the IAP API. Once it is enabled, go to IAP console. Click on the SSH and TCP resources. IAP is now successfully enabled. However, we still have warning appearing in the configuration section. That is because the firewall rules which we talked about in the prerequisites are not yet met. So we are going to edit the firewall rule and we are going to configure this firewall rule to allow the IAP traffic. So click on Edit Firewall, create a new firewall rule, give it a meaningful name. Network is default. In case you are using any custom VPC, then you can choose your own VPC here. But in our case, we are using the default network, so we'll go with the default network. In target, select all instances in this network. And in IPv4, type this IP range. Select specified protocols and ports. Let's update the SSH, RDP, and these two ports for HTTP and HTTPS access on the Windows virtual machines. Let's update the firewall rule. And when the firewall rule is created or updated, the applicable instances or the applicable applications are visible here. After configuring the firewall rules, if the warning is still there, look for a service called as proxy and open the secure web proxy. Enable this API. Let's go back to IAP. Click on the SSH and TCP resources. So after refreshing, we can see that the IAP configuration is now appearing as OK. Let's go to Discovery UI, manage credentials. Now let's perform the credential test one more time. This time we know that we have our services deployed in US Central region. So let's perform test. And the credential test result is now successful because along with the basic prerequisites, we have also met the additional prerequisites of configuring the IAP. That is validating that our service account has these two permissions and IAP is configured along with the firewall rules. Let's now perform another discovery scan and see if we can discover the hosts. Click Add a new run. Let's name it. Select Cloud as the target, Google Cloud Platform. We already have the credentials configured. Let's select the region that we have deployed our services in. Make sure that The identity aware proxy sessions, it's set to enabled in case you want to discover the hosts using IAP, that is identity aware proxy. You can enable the session logging in case they are needed for any troubleshooting purpose. Let's click OK and wait for the scan to complete. The scan is now completed successfully. Let's go to recent runs and open the scan that we created. And there we are. We have successfully discovered two hosts that are associated with our two virtual machines. Let's validate that. Go to two hosts. Let's open one of them. And here we can see the containing VM relationship. It is linked with the same virtual machine which we discovered earlier. In the previous discovery run also, discovery attempted to scan the virtual machine. However, it failed because IAP was not configured with the appropriate permissions. We can validate that by going into the discovery access that failed earlier. And let's go to the session results. And here we can see that the required permissions for the IAP were not enabled on the service account. Thus, the previous discovery run could not infer a host. However, after we configured IAP and enabled all the required roles and permissions on the service account, we are now able to discover the hosts using IAP. So this concludes my demo on how to configure IAP and how to discover hosts using IAP. Let's now look into what GCP labels or tags discovery is all about. GCP labels are modeled as tag attributes in Discovery UI. We'll be seeing a demo on how to assign labels in GCP and how to discover them using BMC Discovery. What is a cloud tag? It is basically a label which you can assign to any of your cloud resources or services. It consists of a tag name and an optional tag value. The purpose of using the cloud tags or the labels is to categorize the cloud services and the resources. It is also used to quickly identify the resources which you have configured based on the labels. BMC Discovery supports these cloud providers for scanning the cloud tags or labels. Azure, AWS, Google, and Oracle are some of the major cloud providers. Now let's see how to assign the labels or tags to your cloud resources and how to discover them by using BMC Discovery. I'm back into my GCP console and I have assigned two different labels to my virtual machines. Before initiating a new discovery run, let's review the existing virtual machine results one more time. So let's go to two virtual machines. And we do not have anything called as tag or label yet in discovery. So let's go to manage discovery and add a new run. Let's select the cloud provider as GCP, the default credential that we only have added, the region, and click OK. We'll wait for the scan to finish, and once the scan is finished, we will review to find out whether the tags are discovered and associated with the respective virtual machines. The scan is now completed. Let's go to recent runs, go to tag discovery, and to our two virtual machines. Let's customize and add the tags column. We are able to see the tags. Let's open the virtual machine instance. And as we can see, the tags are discovered successfully and they are associated with the respective virtual machine. So this concludes my demo on creating and discovering tags using BMC Discovery. Let's now look at the scenario of troubleshooting some common issues. The GCP scan fails with HTTP error 403 and 404. And this is the error message that you will see be logged into the log message. And this error message will only occur when the API is disabled. So you need to enable the failing APIs in GCP with the URL that is already shared in the error message. Now, if you remember in the cloud overview section, we talked about having all the required API access enabled. So this is one of the basic prerequisites that has to be met. Once the prerequisite is met or the required API is enabled, rescan your GCP estate and the scan will succeed. Whenever you see an error where the GCP scan is timing out, saying that it failed to get a certain service client and error is timed out, Discovery times out when the IPv6 is enabled in the scanned virtual machines, but IPv6 is not working in the network that is configured for your virtual machines. So you need to validate and ensure that IPv6 is enabled. And if it is enabled, you need to disable it and rerun the scan. There are detailed steps about checking whether IPv6 is enabled and how to disable in this specific documentation. These are some of the important documentation references which we have for you. Discovering the Google Cloud Platform, troubleshooting some of the cloud discovery failure issues, and discovering the hosts using IAP in Google Cloud Platform. Recently, we had two webinars on Azure Cloud Discovery Essentials and AWS Cloud Discovery Essentials, which will be very helpful for you. In summary, we have seen the overview of cloud discovery. We have reviewed the prerequisites which are needed for GCP discovery to work successfully. We configured them in GCP and we configured them in Discovery UI. We were able to successfully discover the virtual machines and the storage services which we configured in GCP. We were also able to discover the GCP tags. We have successfully configured IAP and discovered hosts using IAP in Discovery. We also saw some of the common troubleshooting scenarios and how we can fix about them. This concludes my webinar. Thank you very much for joining.